should we live forever is the question. A lot of companies have a premise for wanting to help someone achieve an ageless future. It's kind of like this slogan in which you're trying to go, like, we want an ageless future. But the reality is that we are all constrained by gravity. We're all constrained by time. We're all constrained by certain things. And so when we really dissect into what the companies are doing, it's how do we look at aging? That's the most important thing, is can you build solutions to problems that are still unanswered? And can you do that by means of either investing in the companies or doing it yourself? And then figuring out how to make sure that what you're building is also thinking about the societal implications of what you're building.
So welcome, Artem, to Stronghold. I will say I learned a lot about you when I was researching. What I couldn't find is where you grew up. Where are you from?
Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah. I wonder what the internet tells you about me. Like, when you're doing your research, what was that? A lot.
So you're from Sacramento.
Yeah.
Tell me what I need to know about you as a kid.
Okay. Okay. Great question. A very introverted kid. The stuff that I do now makes me very extroverted. You might think I'm like this, grew up as this extroverted kid who was completely comfortable with all of that. It took time. I think a lot of my parents really helped me through. You just like, go ask a question. It's okay. People like getting at questions. They like to be heard from. They want to be engaged with. So a lot of that. I liked math growing up. So studying was a thing. I don't know. I was always into kind of the stuff that I do in my own bubble, the stuff in my mind in a way, and then kind of branching out from there into the external world. I still get the jitters when I go on stage and present or talk at conferences. It's a process. It took some time, but I mean, it was a gradual thing in a way.
Do you think that introverted people can become extroverted people, or is it more just like train yourself to be in an extrovert space?
I think they can. I have an example of that. You could. It really comes down to kind of like, I guess what is the end goal, right? Like, as someone who's fully introverted, who wants to, like, are they trying to be a public speaker? Are they trying to be engaging in some aspect? It really depends. Like, for me, it was just a matter of necessity. I had to get up and present my research. I had to get up and present my stuff to the class. I had to go. I'm the first of 3 boys, and I'm like, well, I have to go do this because ain't no one going to be helping me to do this than me. I have to go and do this. So it was a lot of necessity, which translated into comfort, and that comfort translated into the ability to do it. So it comes down to what is driving it, the driving force behind it.
Tell me about a specifically pivotal point in your life.
Honestly, for me, my personal moment probably would be when I went to college. There was an aspect of like shelter that you get within being in the home environment, and then you go to a university setting, and you're kind of like out on your own in a way, right? Even though you have your family and community in some aspect of tangential closeness, you still have to sort through things and realize that now you're doing things that actually will impact your future in some capacity. While in high school, you're doing all this because you have to do this, because you have to, like, you get to a point where you have to go through this rigmarole of everything. And you're like, okay, well, I'm here. Now what? What do I do now? What degree do I choose? What's a degree? How do I choose a degree? My parents were immigrants to the United States. And so for them, a lot of this was the first time when someone is going through a 4-year degree program and going into then doing grad school and doing that full process. They did community college and did their transferring and stuff into kind of getting their degrees in order to get that process done. But then you're talking, okay, this kid is like, okay, he's doing biology. None of us are doctors. He's studying medicine. Like, what is this? Now he's doing his PhD. I have no idea what you do. My mom will be like, I don't know what you do, honey, but like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm really supporting you here, And so it's kind of like those things, like what decisions will lead into that next step, and so forth. And that, I think, was the hardest part for me, is realizing, okay, well, I actually have to think about this now. What does that mean? What is that next step? But then I feel like, personally, at least for my journey, there's never been an actual, like, this moment decided the future of everything. And all of a sudden I had this aha light bulb moment. It was like one to the next, to the next, to the next. And it kind of all connected after the fact. But then during the fact, you're just doing it. I don't know how to describe it other than in that type of progression series.
Do you think that you just, do you work, was your brain work away where you were searching for a perfect path, or you're like, let's see where life takes me next?
To be honest, I used to be, let's search for the perfect path. And then you realize there is no perfect path, and the path will always change until the day you die. And so my realization from that came after going through undergrad and then deciding if I should do medical school or grad school. And I realized going down the med school route was not the route I wanted to go to. And then grad school was something that I thought was on the back burner. I was like, I don't do it. It's okay. I don't really want to. I was pre-med, tunnel vision, doctor. That's all I was doing. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, actually, what is this over here? And then now I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did this. It worked out really well. But I honestly think, at least my motto now is, if you have an opportunity that's presented to you, take it if it feels right, and then just do the best you can in it. And the next one will present itself afterwards. And often everything that I've done, and whatever background you saw, the diversification of stuff is so broad that it's really hard to like say, how did you line this all up? Well, there is no line between one to the other. This was a cool opportunity. This was an interesting kind of project. This was something that would be fun to do. Let's try it. And if I don't like it, okay, well, I tried it. At least I know that I've tried it.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I will have it in short tell me a little bit about your career path.
Sure.
Ever. Or like to where you are today, I guess.
Okay. Because I'm like, well, to Stanford was pre-med, med school didn't work out, grad school, PhD, and that is to Stanford. To where I am today. So it all goes to like trying things. So while I got to grad school, the difference and just, I got to school and first I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is doable. I haven't been in school for a couple of years. Like I can study, and the answer is you can. But then the first class that I had was called quantitative physiology. And I'm like, this is easy. I'm a pre-med. How hard can this be? And then I started the class, and the first homework assignment was, you have to code up in Python the circulatory system of your body in terms of flow rates and all this other stuff. So random stuff that's like, well, first it's like, what is Python? I'm like, oh, what is Python to begin with? I'm like, half the class raised their hands because we didn't know what that word. We thought it was a snake. No offense to the coders that are listening to this, but I have since learned how to code. Let's just say that, so no one don't throw judgment on me for not knowing. But I came from a school where computer science was siloed in a capacity of the Department of Computer Science was doing that only in the Department of Computer Science. And then the Department of Biology was studying biology. And the integration between the two wasn't as prominent as at Stanford. You come here and I'm taking an engineering class in biology that is asking me to code a system that I don't know even how to start with. So let's just say that was a big turning point / challenge that I had to deal with. Like, let's deal with coding. What is that? And so hence I'm like, well, when else am I going to go to school and learn computer science? I guess now is the time. And so then that kind of pushed me down doing that. And then doing the process, I learned about what AI is, this black box of mystery that unravels certain things and magically does things. And like, it's not really magical once you actually look underneath the curtain. It's just statistical modeling of parsing data. From there, I met a gentleman by the name of Ranjan Nag, who was teaching a class on Intro to AI. And he and I started working together, and that kind of led to this aspect of being plugged into what is this venture stuff? Like, people do venture. You're coming from Sacramento. What is that? No one has heard of that before. And then you're like, well, okay, venture. What is this black box of venture? And then you're like, well, it's just an aspect of looking at the risk profiles of companies and thinking about whether or not it's an investable area, whether or not the science makes sense, whether or not the certain de-risking of just the technology and the product market fit exists. How do you put all that together? Well, then, so each of these things were opportunities that I'm like, I'm curious. I want to know. Let's try it. And then that kind of all started connecting later. But during the process, I was just trying it, honestly. Just trying to see what it was, because I think for me, the curiosity aspect of understanding what it is, that there's this bubble and this story, or that this like aspect of what people are talking about, this community of people in venture and startups and AI and this. And I'm like, I guess I'm a small town guy. If I'm coming here and I'm like, I've heard of this, but it's not as predominant and prevalent as the Bay Area itself. And so when you come here, you're like, okay, what? The question, what is this? You know?
Yeah. And when you are, it seems like involved with a couple of venture firms. Long VC, am I saying it correctly?
Longevity. So it's kind of like playing on the longevity. Yes. So longevity is a fund out of Switzerland. They primarily focus on investing in companies that are helping with lifespan and health span and thinking of improving someone's longevity. And that as a term has been now more mainstream adopted, and folks have been really talking about that as a means of improving your overall well-being. Even a lot of people from the tech domain are kind of getting a little bit more excited about that space and kind of thinking about how can you use technology as a means to solve biology, and kind of thinking about that in the broader scale of aging as people get older. So.
And I would love to hear from you, what does an ageless future look like? What does it mean to you?
To live forever? Well, the question then becomes is, do you want to live forever? You know, like you tell me, like, do I? I don't know. I don't think so. I think, I mean, if you ask the pure technologists in me, it could be interesting to see what that would look like. The sci-fi movies, you know, there's like the aspect of sci-fi-ness to it, like the ability to do that. You transcend time. But then there's also an aspect of humanism involved where time is a construct in which we kind of are defining our existence. And so should we live forever is the question. I don't think I want to be honest, unless you can like prevent everything that happens as you get older. And then at that point, I mean, imagine yourself being around for 1,000 years and it's only you and everyone else around you keeps passing, and you just like, I think you just lose connection to people. You know, there's yeah, like unless everyone is living the same, then it's like, sure. Yeah.
Is this like for a select group of people, or is it for the world?
Well, that's a great point. Is if everyone's doing it, sure, maybe, but then, you know, there's always the risks of like, well, how do we ensure social systems are in place? How do we make sure that people, healthcare and equity and access is still there? How do we make sure that the structures and the systems that have been built around this concept of time and as certain start and end time, how does that all fit into that picture of living forever? But then if we dissect it further, I don't necessarily see the entire world wanting to. I mean, a lot of people don't want to live forever, you know. So there's a lot of caveats, right? It's like, do I want to live forever? Is the world going to live forever? Can the world sustain everyone forever? And all these other things. And
is this conversations you have with the companies that you invest in, or is this way just like, is it much more specific?
Great question. This type of conversation, I think, is a lot more theoretical, because a lot of companies have a premise for wanting to help someone achieve an ageless future. It's kind of like this slogan in which you're trying to go, like, we want an ageless future. But the reality is that we are all constrained by gravity. We're all constrained by time. We're all constrained by certain things. And so when we really dissect into what the companies are doing, it's how do we look at aging? Is aging a disease or is aging a process? A disease inherently has a fix, right? If you're sick, if you have a disease, you can fix that. Is aging a process by which you have a gradual decrease in function of something over time? And so what does that mean? And the way I personally look at it is aging is a process where as you get older, certain things stop working as well. And so how do you intervene by having better therapies? You know, my mom's getting older, for example. How do I make sure that her knees still function and she could do walking as normally as she'd normally do? Putting an aspect maybe of an extracellular matrix or something in her knees to have that arthritis be less as she gets older. So things like that. And the way in which we look at company investing is going down that route is, okay, how do we look at therapeutic and non-therapeutic domains? How do we help the progression by slowing it or maybe reversing some of it? But is there something like an aging pill right now? The answer is no. Can aging be fully cured? Well, if yes, the second question is, do you want it to be fully cured?
Yeah.
You know,
how does that process look like then?
Exactly.
Just healthy until one day we're like, okay, I guess I'm done.
Or do you keep taking the pills in order to stay at that level of agelessness. As soon as you can't afford the pills, you just go and you die right away, because whatever the case may be, like all of a sudden you're just like, okay, well, I can't afford the medication right now, and then all of a sudden you just age, wrinkle, and die real quick because everything turns on and is hyperactive. I don't know what that's going to look like, but there's this aspect of in the community in which people kind of debate that and kind of what does that definition look like to you, and each person has their own way of looking at it. I look at it more as a practical. I'm an engineer by training, so my approach is very practical. You have a problem, you have a solution that needs to be solved, and if you're tackling that solution, how are you tackling it to get that therapeutic benefit? Not only that, but then is there a market for it? You can build all this stuff. The fun things that engineers love to do is build things, as you probably are familiar with. The problem with building things, there's an aspect of building things that matter, and that's just the aspect of I want to contribute to the world and society and so forth. But if you need to pair that with a business, you need to build things that matter that also have a buyer. So don't build things unless you have a buyer to begin with. So there's a lot of these things, and working in the early kind of stage startup domain, you have to think more on, is the builder a good enough builder to actually execute on the plan? Is what they're building actually, is there a need for that in the grand market of things? And will there be a buyer long-term, a bigger group that has more money that can say, yeah, what you're building is great, de-risk it for us, we'll take it from here, type of thing.
Yeah. Do you have any companies right now, or are there any like trends that you're really excited about?
In the longevity space? Yeah. So there's an interesting component in where I think right now the wave of generative AI, which we are very familiar with in San Francisco, has kind of started enabling the dissection of data from text in a lot more of a broader capacity to be able to kind of think more on the correlations of diseases. The problem with a lot of personalized medicine therapies is the correlation of a gene leads to a protein, which leads to a physical outcome. It's causal versus corollary. We would think that this will lead to this, but the reality is that may also lead to this, this, and this. And maybe these three things involved also will lead to these three things. So then what? Then it's the dissection of really getting more data to get better understandings of those connections will really help. And so I think this in the field, the folks who are working on developing platform technologies and approaches that are using a big amount of data that they can have a data moat around, and then using that as a means of doing some sort of interesting approaches to something that hasn't been truly solved yet. So kind of in that domain, there's an interesting microbiome company that is looking at data mining things from the metabolites that the biome releases as they kind of process enzymes. That I think is an interesting approach because the microbiome in itself is kind of an untapped, and people have tried to, but it is considered a second brain, and essentially in your body is a good gut equals a happy body type of thing. Similarly, if you can kind of have look at therapeutic intervention, there could be a way to prevent certain degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or anything that is neurodegenerative. So I think that space is interesting. The fields that I see growing is neurotech. There's what I was mentioning earlier about the aspect of taking your brain waves and translating that into words. That's super interesting because you need a lot of technology. They're using a large amount of AI computation to parse through what is essentially squiggly lines on a screen. Yeah. But an inflection point in one squiggly line, and I can tell you this works because I developed stuff like this. So in my PhD world, we developed a smart bandage that you can correlate certain aspects of the wound by thinking about a sensor input will tell you what condition your skin is in, and then it will tell you whether or not you need more treatment or less treatment based on the definitions of parameters of sensors they can build into the program. And in the lab that I was affiliated with, the Shannon Val group at Standford, they're developing eSkin, which is kind of stretchable arrays that you can put over the skin as a means to measure certain inputs. And one of the projects that we worked on was a implantable ECG electrode on top of a brain. And we were able to show that in a model, if you have a paralysis and you're trying to identify which parts of the brain are correlated with that paralysis, you can find defined neural inputs in which you have spikes in certain activities if you're trying to make a certain movement. There's an aspect of being able to do neuromotor rehearsement, right? Where rehearsal was just closing your eyes or doing a VR rehearsing of a certain thing. Your brain thinks it's real because you're going through that same process. So me talking to you right now, I'm having my brain output certain signals. If I couldn't talk to you, but I was thinking it, those same signals would still be outputted. Now, can we use technology as a means to capture that? Yes. Is that now more feasible? Yes. Are people actually having something like that? That's actually a product you can touch and feel? Yes. When will that hit the public? TBD.
Exactly what I required. It was going to be my question. When is this something regular patients can see? This sounds fantastic.
It's wonderful. And I mean, there are UCSF and Stanford are doing clinical trials and doing testing with people who are paralyzed and can't speak but want, or maybe at least in the case that I'm referring to at UCSF, they published a paper on this recently. The lady was normal, and then she had an accident, that pivotal moment that she can no longer have anything that was functional. All of a sudden, she's like, I cannot work, even though I used to be a comedian in my family, and now I'm stuck in the body of not being able to communicate. And so she was very willing to participate in a trial like this in terms of helping with the development of this type of stuff. And for her, she's really excited. But when will it get to people? I mean, there's an aspect of technology development that's going on right now. Say that that technology at the point was like, okay, we're ready to ship it. Then you go through the rigmarole of the FDA and all the approvals, right? You have to show safety, efficacy. You have to make sure it's safe. We're not going to hurt anyone with it. That if it's implanted in your brain or wherever, you're not going to have your body reject it. Like an implant, if you put into your body's going to fight it off because it's a foreign object. Once you do all that, and that's the part that's going to take more time, right? You're going through this aspect of proving that it's safe for human use, which is good because we don't want everything on the Joe Schmo, anyone and everything available. And then all of a sudden you have people just dying left and right because things aren't working. You want to de-risk. So once it's de-risked, then that is at the point where it's going to be available for human consumption. If you ask me for timelines, 10 years, 10 years, maybe 5 years. I mean, Neuralink is doing really well. So they're going to push forward with their stuff. A friend of mine was doing research into an electrode array. There's startups so people are working in the research development stage of doing validation, probably within a decade. I wouldn't say it's going to take a decade to get this into the general public. It's going to be within a decade. Now, the bigger order, the higher order bit is who's paying for it. Like the beauty of it is we can develop all this technology, but then the next question is, well, if the FDA gives me a stamp of approval, does the insurance say, I got you covered? Or, sorry, this is an extra treatment that is really outside the scope of normal standard of care?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest hurdle, I feel like, to have wider adoption or accessibility for folks.
And as this technology is being developed, you also have to know the conversation that's on the ethical conversations, right? It seems like that's important in what you do at Standford. I've been reading the sentence so many times.
Which one?
Exploring that ethical and truly used implications of algorithms. And I was like, how can I ask him that question? Less complicated, and I couldn't figure it out.
Well, you tell me, what did you get from it when you read it? And just like ballpark it, because actually this is really good feedback, because we're about to, I have a paper coming out tomorrow in response to the AI, the White House AI Bill of Rights that came out from the White House in February of this year. And we responded of, this is a good start, but these are things that you can do to make it better. So that's being released tomorrow, which I'm super excited about. But with this, I'm curious, like when you read this, what was your interpretation?
I guess I lost it in dual use, but like exploring the ethical implications. I think I can understand.
Okay, amazing. This is good feedback because right now is the next paper being worked on specifically on this, so it's kind of framing in a way that it would make sense for people. What is dual use? Dual use is this aspect of, and by the way, the wording in itself, when we went down the rabbit hole, and I need to update my bio online, and because it turns out dual use is not the right word choice to use to explain this stuff. I think its unintended consequences make a little bit more sense.
Got it.
Because dual use is like, after researching this, you realize it's primarily used in biowarfare and nuclear warfare, and we're not really doing that with the algorithms in any capacity. So it's more of unintended consequences or secondary effects or the not first principle, not the first use indications kind of thing. So it's more of, okay, I'm a developer. I'm developing an algorithm. I wanted to do drug discovery, for example, and I'm using all this data and I publish everything online. And then some bad actor decides that they would like to use that as a means to develop the next COVID virus. And they have the data, they have the algorithm. You can tweak the algorithms in a way that will mine the data in a certain way to get a certain outcome, or maybe mine it in a different way than what was originally mined. And then what? Then you can have the risk of having that quote unquote bad actor doing something unintended with the primary indication of what you're doing. And so the thought is, how do we prevent that, knowing it will still happen? Because if someone wants to do bad, they will still do bad. And you cannot blame the computer scientists for everything that faults in the world. Because at the end of the day, you know, you could only put so many safeguards into an algorithm in order to prevent it from being used for harm. So then the question for the developer is, okay, I'm developing something that's going to have this primary indication, but what are the secondary and tertiary indications that may be negative that are not thought through that I should think about and maybe put safeguards in place to prevent that from happening?
Exactly. And these safeguards are, give an example of what would that be like to have laws in place or talk to governments or not develop the thing?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what, you know, the interesting component behind it is like, if we're thinking about AI in the space of drug discovery, you need a bunch of data to mine that data to find your next drug target. So should I, as a regulator, say, no, you may not do that because someone can use that data and mine it for nefarious reasons and all of a sudden get a bunch of people killed? Well, then in my opinion, that stifles innovation. You need to innovate in order to progress, in order to identify what the pain points are, but maybe it doesn't have to happen as fast. Like, you don't need to have it on Hugging Face tomorrow or the next day or five minutes later or on, you know, any kind of open forum. Maybe taking it 2 days later will be just as fine as 1 day, you know, and so things like that. An aspect of, can you make sure that the data that's used is representative of the entire patient population? There is an aspect of, there's not enough data to have a diverse set of data to begin with. And so people are training algorithms on data sets that may not be generalizable to the human, to just the normal Joe Schmo. How do you make sure that the folks who are not represented in those data sets get their data in there? Can we make sure that those folks know or contribute in a way that they don't feel infringed upon or don't feel like their data is being misused? And things in that capacity. To your point about whether or not regulators can regulate algorithms, no. An algorithm, I mean, a short answer is no, and people can come and talk to me about the different ways in which you can and cannot. The reality is an algorithm is ever changing. That algorithm tomorrow will be different than the algorithm today and the algorithm yesterday because the weights changed. You have different tuning of the algorithms and different combinations of the formulas and the different ways in which you're parsing the data. So if we take an apple and a tomato and we're saying they're both red, they're the same thing, but they're different entities in a whole. That's the same thing with algorithms, in my opinion. But you can safeguard the outcome of that algorithm, perhaps in the way that it's going to impact someone in terms of preventing certain negative consequences of that algorithm. But necessarily regulating an algorithm, that is a very hard thing to start with, to begin with.
Is there any unintended consequences that you feel at night?
My initial response to that question was probably yes, but because I'm just always tired at the end of the day, I just go to bed real quick. I think the short answer is there are, right? You're always wanting to make sure that in the space of biomedicine, people are not going to be creating, misusing that in terms of synthetic warfare or synthetic chemicals or anything like that. It is still feasible. People can still do that. You can still create that. But then you'll need the supplies, the sequencers, everything that they'll need to put all that together. Now, does that keep it up at night? Enough to know that that's a thing, but also by the time I get to bed, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm out. I hope, right? Some days, most days, just like you get to a point, you're like, wow, that was a long day. Okay, time to, and then you're out, kind of thing.
I feel like you've had, at your young age, have done a lot of stuff already, but I would like to have you answer the question, what, at the end of however long your life is, 80 or 250 years?
Or can end tomorrow. You never know. Exactly. Yeah.
What kind of legacy are you hoping to leave?
That he tried new things and he did the best he could and everything. That's it. Like contributing to the good of helping society in some capacity. And I hope that involves building stuff that helps people. So that's the most important thing is, can you build solutions to problems that are still unanswered? And can you do that by means of either investing in the companies or doing it yourself? And then figuring out how to make sure that what you're building is also thinking about the societal implications of what you're building. That's about it. But yeah, like, I don't know. I honestly was just like, great question. Have I thought about this? Probably at some point. Have I thought about it in the context of this discussion? No, but yeah, I'd love to actually ask you the same question. Like, what do you want to be known for when you are?
Very good question. So you're catching me at an interesting time because I'm a new mom. So I think my worldview shifted recently.
Congrats, by the way.
To I want to since I was very little, I wanted to make a documentary film that had sort of an audience, right? And up until I had the baby, now that I have the baby, I was like, the only thing I want is to create a good life for a kid, or give me the best opportunity for a good life. And it kind of ends with that. It's kind of cliche.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, that's the cycle. Like that's the beauty of life in a way. You're like, now you're at the point where you feel responsible for an entity that is not yourself, right? And so you're like, wow, this baby, and I gotta make sure that the baby is provided for, and making sure that the life is better. And I feel like then like that mindset shift is what I feel like every parent did, even my parents and everyone else is like, okay, we know we're gonna struggle a little bit. That's the nature of being a parent, but we're going to make it such that our kids have something better that we didn't have in some capacity.
Yeah.
But you should still do your documentary. Yeah, exactly. Like you should still do it. Maybe do a documentary on longevity.
Yeah, this all seems very wild and interesting.
Sure.
I read that you have written a couple of articles about work-life now.
Yes.
Are you...
I try to subscribe to what I write. I don't want to hand wave and say, do all this stuff, but then you're just not. I was on a panel on last Thursday, a MedTech venture panel in New York. And the question that's, what do you want to have everyone here who's building some cool product know? And everyone's like kind of going down their line and saying that make sure your runway is extending and make sure that you have, you're doing good by your investment. The general stuff you want to make sure you're doing. I'm like, yeah, that's very important. All that is like very important. So when it came to my turn, I'm like, yes to everything that they said, and get a hobby. That was my response to that whole thing, because honestly, life's hard. Building a startup is hard. Working is hard, and everything is, the illusion of making it easy, making it seem like everything's great is just that. It is an illusion. I feel like everyone, if they really sit down and thought about it, it's not easy. It's hard. So the hobby component of disconnecting, or the hobby component of finding a community, will enable longevity in the simplest way. There's a recent documentary that was put on Netflix about the blue zones and why people in the blue zones live longer. The blue zones are spaces where you have a higher average life expectancy than the normal kind of global norm per se in developed countries. And a big component of the blue zones, aside from the Mediterranean diet and so forth, is community. Whatever that means for you will enable your longevity, because community and the integration of the elderly with the young, there's an aspect of that where it's an interesting mind shift where you can have a dinner table where you have a multi-generational house, but it's interesting that in the United States, it's not as predominant and prevalent. There's more of a elderly care, elderly homes. We kind of ship them off. You hit a certain time of like the value add becomes the question of what is that value add? But the blue zones are notorious for the community engagement in which the elderly feel like they're still part of the community. And as such, they live longer because of that. So there's this aspect. And then I think that translates back to young people where we're always hustling, going, figuring out like, go. We need to do all this. We have our check boxes. With the kid, you have the roster of things to do before you go to work during the day. Like, I'm sure that list is never ending. Yeah. I mean, I feel my list are never ending, but like, I don't know, just going on a run, whatever hobby, finding a running group.
What do you do? What it start?
My hobby is the gym, honestly. Even though when I go to the gym, I'm not really fully working out some days. I'm just here in the atmosphere of at the gym, and I feel like I'm already contributing to better health, even though I should be, doing more. I think for me that is one. And then the other aspect is just like getting outside and walking around. I started running recently, not as fast as when I used to be in high school, but I'm kind of trying, and I've figured that there's running groups in San Francisco that I can join that have certain speeds at where I'm at, kind of thing. So, but things like that, honestly. So yeah, to short answer is I try to aspire to what I write, because otherwise it's just like words on paper, and then it's like, well, cool, bro, like amazing. So what?
It's true though. Like it is hard.
Yes.
To keep up a good work-life balance, it's hard. You have to compromise.
You too.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully this was good, and appreciate you hosting and having a good, insightful chat with me. All right.